r/ruleshorror. Hosted by you/Jahorrible26. The Wonderland Ritual. Have you ever wanted to experience chaos in its purest form? To know firsthand what a truly lawless world with no rules is like? Who knows, maybe you'd want to stay in such a world, maybe you'll even thrive in it, or maybe you're just one of those fear-fueled, adrenaline junkies who just want the rush of seeing just how long it would take for you and your sanity crumble and become just as chaotic as the world surrounding you. Whatever your reasons, I can help you get there, but I can't guarantee you'll make it back out. So if you are one of these adrenaline junkies or agents of chaos, then keep reading. Now fair warning, despite what the name of this ritual may imply, this won't be any Alice down the rabbit hole type of adventure. Hell, even Tim Burton's take on the classic tale had more sunshine and rainbows in it. Quite frankly, the only people finding any real wonder from this place are masochists, sadists, and anarchists. If you are a relatively sane and moral human planning on entering, you'll either turn to a psychopath or, well, we'll get to that later. It was dubbed Wonderland strictly due to the extreme randomness and unruliness, along with a specific item needed to begin the ritual. However, since the naming, a few of the entities within this world have also been given some Lewis Carroll-inspired names, but trust me, they share very little in common with the goofy, wacky characters they've been named after. To get started, you'll first have to grab a few things in order to begin. I shall list the items needed below. 1. A decent-sized blade. This is technically not needed, but it is very strongly recommended you bring some sort of protection. The weapon doesn't really matter, but light one-handed weapons like a kitchen knife or maybe hand axe. Don't worry about having to be Rambo or anything. The hostile creatures in there, for the most part, are glass cannons. Yeah, they will fuck your shit up like the morning after tequila and midnight Taco Bell, but you land a good cut or stab anywhere on them and they'll drop like, well, a night after tequila and midnight Taco Bell. 2. A broken pocket watch. It's been learned that this could work with a portable clock, as long as it is both mechanical and busted. However, pocket watches seem to be the most effective. 3. 4 candles, 2 different colors between them. The colors of the candles don't really matter as long as the colors are equal. For example, 2 white candles, 2 blue. Unlike the pocket watch, using 2 specific colors doesn't seem to boost chances of the ritual working. 4. A small bottle or flask of liquor. It is smart to bring either whiskey or bourbon. Don't worry if you're not a drinker, it isn't going to be for you. 5. An item with great emotional value. This will be your key to making it back to the real world. The item can be literally anything as long as you hold a strong emotional tie to it. Something you'd have a hard time letting go of. 6. A large survival bag, for if you don't make it out. Once you have all these items together, you are ready to begin the ritual. Now this will have to be done during the day, however you will have to go to sleep in order for you to enter, so for people who sleep soundly at night, it'd probably help to try and pull an all-nighter, at least until the sun has risen completely. Before taking your little nap, set the 4 candles around you, at least 3 feet away from where you'll be laying, and since these are flames just laying around, might do you some good to fireproof the place. Bring whatever items you are taking with you into the circle, then lay down with the watch in your hands. You don't have to sleep in some sort of super specific position, just make sure you're able to keep it in your hands until you fall asleep. If everything is done right, you'll wake up to extreme nausea, natural since you will be on a spinning platform falling downwards until you reach the lobby. The lobby is a single large room, extremely large, either tiled or carpeted. It's never the same color for anyone. At the very end of this room will be a small wooden desk, with a lanky pale-suited man with slicked back hair and dead air filling his eyes reading a paper behind it. This man has been given the name of the Gatekeeper. Some believe he may be the one in control of this world, others say he's some sort of demon. Approach the desk and you will see a small silver bell. You'll also be able to read a bit of his paper. Much like the floor, it's never the same for anyone. The papers seem to be just talking about what one specific person from anywhere in the world was doing at that moment in time. Ring his bell and he will quickly lower his paper to meet your eyes with a wide grin. He won't say anything, but simply hold out his hand. This is your signal to hand him one of 2 things. If you've decided maybe this isn't the smartest move, hand him your key item. If you wish to push forward, hand him the pocket watch. Once he's taken the watch, he'll clear his throat before standing up to reveal his overwhelming height. It is never the same, but he will always be much taller than you. Once he's fully standing, he'll flash that uncanny grin one more time, before dropping the watch to the ground and letting it break to pieces. This will open a portal of sorts of rapid flashing in colors and patterns. The gatekeeper will clear his throat one more time before wishing you to enjoy your stay, before violently pulling you forwards and stuffing you down it, and within seconds you'll begin your walk through Wonderland, starting with the Rosebush Road. Sounds pleasant, right? Well, don't get excited. These rose bushes are giant, sentient thorn vines with a few tiny flowers here and there, and they are very hostile. Now if you brought something to protect you, this walk shouldn't be terrible. One hit to a vine and they'll back off from you, so it might be smart to go on the offensive. Don't get it twisted though, you are gonna get hit, most likely more than once. It will be essentially a half-mile stroll through a thorn hallway. Don't worry about dying, or being harmed to the point of crippling, this world has semi-invincibility. See, you'll still be able to break some bones, sever a spinal cord, get your skull caved in, puncture a lung, you name it, you'll bounce back from it within a few minutes. Don't get mistaken though, you will still very much feel the pain, and it won't get any easier to handle. After your little walk of pain you will reach a large yellow brick road-esque path leading to your city. It's given this name due to the fact that the city is made up of every place you have even the briefest memory of, its citizens, all faces you've seen before if even for a moment, all merging together aggressively. Many also call this section the glitch in the matrix given how buildings and people will spaz around, lag, and even begin no-clipping into each other. The sky will flash like rainbow TV static, some believe this to be the gatekeeper overseeing it all. This city is made to absolutely fuck with your head, especially in terms of the people you come across, whose faces and limbs will be constantly contorting and meshing together with another passerby, only speaking to you in robotic binary text, occasionally crashing, not to mention the fact they all act as poorly programmed NPCs. The goal here is to find your house/apartment/wherever you call home. It will be noticeable due to the fact it will be completely intact and stable. If you're a bit of a hermit, well then it probably won't be such a bad time. However, if you're a bit of a social butterfly who loves adventure, well you're probably fucked. By far the worst part of your time here is the fact you are affected by this glitch, and you'll occasionally deform and spaz out uncontrollably, and it will hurt very very much. Once you're able to locate your home, step inside and you'll be met with a single room of your house, most likely the kitchen or living room, filled with the sounds of classic smooth jazz. It's here you will meet the Mad Hatter. Now to be honest, the nickname makes very little sense other than the fact they both wear rather flashy top hats. This Mad Hatter is a well-mannered, civil African American in a long tan dress coat, reading a book, often either the works of Clive Barker or Mark Twain. He'll often speak through quotes from philosophers such as Socrates and Sun Tzu. Don't worry about needing to memorize them, or read into them to solve some kind of riddle, he just enjoys thinking about such things. You'll feel an overwhelming sense of comfort from this man. This is mostly chalked up to the extreme lack of normalcy up to this point. You won't recognize him, but he'll feel like an old family friend you've known your whole life. He will look up from his book and give you a large smile, pointing out that you must have been through quite the ordeal and asking if you'd like to rest for a moment. He will then snap his fingers to manifest a soft leather recliner. Next to it will be a small table with a deck of cards, and 2 extravagantly cut glasses. Feel free to relax, and play a few card games. Note he is more than willing to play any game, but he seems to have a keen fondness towards building card houses, and will always suggest building immaculate mansions and castles which he'll help you build with great enthusiasm. Share a drink or 2 with him if you'd like, just make sure you have at least a quarter of the bottle/flask remaining after your time with him. If you wish to move on, and are able to resist the temptation of sitting there trading stories with this man who will be extremely interested and engaged with any experience you share with, tell him I thank you for your hospitality, allow me to give you a gift. It doesn't need to be exactly those words, but try to stay a little proper and formal, then offer him the liquor. He will accept and tell you how touched he is to have brought a gift, and will offer you one in return, and with another snap of his fingers, will open up yet another portal. Unlike the one you used to enter this work, the location it leads to is very clear, a long hallway. This hallway, much like many things here, is never the same for anyone, but rather a person's representation of classy. At the end of this hallway will be a large checkered pattern door, which leads to either the least, or most painful section of the world, the mad chessboard. Once stepping through you will be sent to an endless black void, with a large black and red chessboard. The pieces will be giant, twisted humanoids, save for the rooks. Pawns resembling malnourished mental hospital patients, with what look like wires sticking out from their heads, and entering their eyeballs. Knights resemble headless horsemen, ones that have been lost to time. Rooks resemble living flesh-like towers that travel by clawing around with large humanoid arms. The bishop resembles a large mummified man, dressed as a pope-like figure wielding a large staff and book. There is no king, only the Red Queen, a large, monstrous woman bandaged head to toe, waiting for someone to challenge her, you. In order to beat her you must kill her. You must step onto the other end of her side, specifically in the spot of a pawn. Remember where you are though, this won't be regular chess, rather a team death match, in which the pieces will begin to attempt and slaughter each other, including you. The queen won't move until you get close however, and you must reach her to land a blow. Remember though, There are no rules here. So what's the best way to win against someone? Well, not to play the game, of course. That's as far as I'll go with that little hint. After all, I don't want to make it too easy for you now, do I? Once you get in range, the queen will begin to attack by wildly thrashing about, slamming her hands and head towards you with great speed. Unlike the other entities you've encountered here, she will take more than one hit. Granted, not many more, just don't expect a simple one and done fight. Once she falls, her body will quickly crumble and melt away to reveal a trap door on the ground, which will lead to your final destination, the cat's room. The cat is what many believe to be the god of chaos within this realm. While he can take any form he pleases, it seems after learning of the title this ritual has been given, he frequently decides to take on an appearance similar to that of the Cheshire Cat from the original story. This room, as you may expect, will be absolute madness and chaos. The sky will flash through multiple different locations, colors and patterns like a green screen. Large creatures and structures with unnatural features will randomly appear, and there will look to be no floor, as if walking on empty air. If you're able to make it through all this and reach the other end of the room, you will reach the cat, most likely laying down in mid-air, and most definitely chuckling like a madman on laughing gas. He will thank you for taking a tour through his little home, and will offer you two things: A, be sent back to where you started, or B, become one of his agents of chaos. It's not exactly known what these agents of chaos do because, well, none of them come back. Choose A and he will open his mouth widely, and his tongue will roll out like a cartoon. Place your key item onto his tongue and it will roll back up, where he will swallow it, and then he will swallow you. You will awake at your starting point shortly after with all 4 candles completely gone, and your key item in your hands where the watch once was. If you're wondering what your reward is for going through all of that, sorry to break it to you, but there is none. Just a long trip through chaos. So if any of you are a true anarchist, or think you can handle something so crazy, then why not give it in hand? Just keep in mind you'll be doing nothing more than walk through madness, but hey, maybe that's your thing, or maybe have a hidden craving for it. r/nosleep. Hosted by you/Jahorrible26. I let a fortune teller read my future. I'm probably going to hell. I've never been a big believer in superstitions, and certainly not one in the paranormal or supernatural. All those magic witchcraft stores selling blessed rocks or chakra candles seemed like nothing but scams banking off people's gullibility. So when my sister suggested stopping at a fortune teller tent we had been passing on our way back to the condo during summer vacation, I was sure we were doing nothing but making some con artist's pocket a little fatter, but she was persistent with the idea till I eventually caved and agreed. I knew shit was gonna get intense the moment we stepped into the tent, and were greeted by the fortune teller, who called us both by our full names. Of course my sister was blown away by this, and I'll admit I was definitely surprised, but not in any good way. Not only have I never seen this woman before in my life, we were on the other side of the country from our home, so it's unlikely this woman saw us around enough to memorize our faces, and even if she did, how the hell did she get our names? At first I thought maybe somehow she swiped our IDs from us, but that was disproven as well, once the lady spoke my thoughts out loud. No, Simon, I neither swiped you or Janet's identification of any kind. Hearing that could only leave me speechless. It was getting harder and harder for me to convince myself there was a logical explanation for all this. If it's more proof you need, please sit, I can read you your whole past, she said, gesturing to the chairs across from us, and she did just that. She went through my entire life story with detail, including things only I knew about, or never told anyone. She even named my exact weight, height and the fact I was left-handed. Once she finished reading my biography, I had no other choice than to believe this woman really did have some sort of psychic abilities. Simon, please leave the tent for a moment, I prefer to do these readings one-on-one, as to avoid any judgment towards another's future, she said as she put on some sort of ruby amulet, in the shape of a flying bird, I think a crow. I shrugged and nodded, before leaving and waiting for my sister to finish so I may have my fortune read. About an hour or so later Janet came out of the tent giggling and bubbly. Guess who's gonna be a big shot on the big screen? She said with a confident smirk. I laughed and rolled my eyes before lightly patting her head. Well then you best start going to your classes when you get back to school. I responded with a sly raise of the eyebrows before entering the tent myself, and taking a seat at the table. Please, let me see your hand. She politely demanded as she stretched hers out towards me. I grabbed her hand and as I did, the amulet, along with her eyes began to glow a bright baby blue. We sat there like that for a good while, she didn't say anything but the facial expressions she made were alarming to say the least, constantly fluctuating between worried, sad, even a little bit of fear. After maybe 45 minutes her eyes and amulet returned to normal, before she quickly recoiled her hand back and gathered her bearings. So what did you see? I asked rather nervously. She looked at me with a great deal of what felt like pity, before shaking her head, clearing her throat, and revealing my future. You will graduate your trade school for welding, and start a business with a good friend made at your time in class. You will have 18 years of thriving business, you will marry, and have 2 children. On the 19th year, your national level company will crumble after your partner was caught with tax fraud and embezzlement. After this you will make your living off freelancing jobs, eventually turning to stealing from clients' homes and offices to make up for your lack of income, and while you will never be caught doing so, some of your thefts will end up severely crippling several people's livelihoods. One night you will come home to your wife sleeping with another man, a man you end up beating to near death, landing you a 15-year in prison with the charge of aggravated assault, in which you'll serve 7 for good behavior, now divorced and jobless. You will manage to get yourself on your feet if only barely, for 4 years, until your children get struck and killed by a car that lost control of its brakes. You will turn to heavy drug and alcohol use, and grow rather violent, serving a total of 2 years on and off due to multiple misdemeanors, and once you find out the man who hit your kids will serve no time for what he did, you will go through great lengths to find his address, go out and purchase a 6-round revolver, drive to his home, and shoot him twice, then his parents, and sister, before turning the gun on yourself and fatally shooting yourself in the head. When she said that, I felt the whole world begin to spin, and felt as if I was gonna vomit my gut up. I could feel myself break out in a cold sweat, turning to her and asking in desperation, "Is there any way to change my future?" She looked at me somberly, before letting out a soft sigh and answering, "There is, but I am unable to tell you how. I have given you all the information I'm capable of giving, so the change in your future ultimately depends on you, but I will tell you, to change your future is extremely difficult. Fate doesn't like losing, and often never does," she said as she removed the amulet from her neck and placing it in a small wooden box. "But, I know now, I know what to avoid, so that means I know what to avoid, right?" I asked in desperation. She gave me a soft smile, one that felt like more comfort than the softest bed. "That's a big reason I started my business. While I do love seeing bright futures of fame and fortune for my clients, like your sister, I more so prefer helping those with a dark future of pain and cruelty." After finishing her speech, her soft smile sank to a pity-filled frown. "But as mentioned before, it is ultimately you who chooses if this future plays out, and I can promise you the answers will not be as clear-cut, or easy to make as you think them to be, and even if will, you humans and your hearts are by far the hardest things to change," she added. That last line sent a chill down my spine, one that I don't think could ever be recreated. "Us humans?" I asked nervously, but even more so curiously. She nodded and gave a soft chuckle. "Come now, Simon, you really think a human would be capable of this?" "No, I've simply taken the form of something your mind can process. Seeing my real form would most likely leave your brain completely fried, and you can push all those worries of me being a demon or monster to the side. You can consider me a third-party participant. I do not come from Earth, hell or the heavens, but from the stars. My people and I have recently discovered you humans and while some of you guys are definitely in need of some guidance, so we use our abilities to try and do just that. Granted, this has still been a rather strenuous task, but to the few that cross us we manage to pull through. Don't be fooled by every shitty psychic readings in an apartment building or some crummy strip mall. There's about 6 of us all in places similar to my tent here," she told me, rather casually mind you. As if everything she just told me was nothing more than official water cooler talk. However, I was in a complete daze. It felt like I was in the strangest lucid dream, while at the same time, still being in reality. She most likely saw my utter confusion, as she gave a deep sigh and smiled. "Look, what I am isn't important. What is important is that you know how much of a terrible person you become, no offense, and now you know how to try and fix it," she said softly before standing up, thanking me for my business, wishing me luck on my journey to change my future, and led me to the exit of the tent. I stepped out and Janet came to my side, beginning to ask me of my future, until she saw my face. "Simon, you all right, buddy?" she asked, waving her hand in front of me and snapping me out of my daze. Yeah, just a lot to take in is all," I responded, sidestepping any other question about it on the way back until she eventually gave up. It's been a few months since then. Janet just got accepted to NYU for acting, and for me, I don't know what to do. I can't just drop out of school. I've halfway through the 2nd semester of my 3rd year. All the student loan debts I've racked up would be going right down the toilet. I've tried figuring out which of my friends was the future business partner to screw me over, ended up turning to a near hermit, but not too long ago, 5 of them invited me to a group chat to talk about all going into business together after graduation, and starting our own company. She never said anything about more than one partner. I don't know if I should just avoid like the plague, or stay around and see how things play out, maybe figure out if it even has anything to do with my future. I've barely been able to eat, let alone sleep. It feels like every night my dreams are invaded by my possible future and all the wrong I do. I'm thinking I get that gun earlier, turn it to myself before I get the chance to do any of it. Posted by you/Jahorrible26. My doppelganger was labeled a John Doe. For about 7 years I worked as a psychiatrist as well as a therapist for Side Hill Mental Institution for the criminally insane. Despite what you may think, most patients weren't violent or evil towards us, simply people who were unfortunately incapable of processing the world and lacked the treatment, or people needed to help. Plenty were able to better themselves through the right medication and teaching. I even remember 2 patients were named fit to re-enter society during my time there. Don't get me wrong though, they were very much so violent, and even a bit twisted. Some of which I'm fairly certain were sane people who managed to get the insanity plea, others gave the signs of quite competent serial killers. Were they of stable mind? There was one patient that I believe, without question, was a spawn of hell. It was about lunchtime when one of the nurses came into my office looking rather uncomfortable, even more so when she made eye contact with me, before clearing her throat and fixing her composure. Dr. Keegan, you're wanted in the patient questioning office, she said a little frantically. I raised an eyebrow and just stared at her for a moment. You see, this questioning office was essentially an interrogation room for patients who committed crime within the walls, or suspects who were obviously not in a right state of mind, be that mental issues or extreme drug use. As you could imagine, these cases were handled by either the police, or staff better equipped for handling these such cases than myself. This patient would be far different however. Yeah, sure, I said with a hint of confusion as I got up from my desk and began making my way down to the office. This confusion only grew as I met the head of psychology along with 2 police officers. I greeted them and asked a question that sent a small chill down my spine, an even greater wave following it as Dr. Swan asked me a question. Steve, you got any siblings? I felt the earth stand still as my nerves locked up. Yeah, little sister. That isn't her in there, is it? I asked frantically. No, she's not here, but you may still want to see this. He replied bluntly. I looked at him in confusion, which turned to fear as the sound of laughter filled the hall. Now it wasn't a deranged howling or anything like that, a completely normal laugh coming from within the interrogation room, the soundproof interrogation room. I quickly rushed over to the room window to see a man sitting at the table, rapidly rocking side to side in his chair, an occasional and severe twitch in his neck, so violent you'd think it'd snap. He also seemed to be holding a meeting, as he began talking around the empty table and waving his arms around. What was strange was the fact we couldn't hear any of his one-way conversations, just his laughs. He's been doing that for about 2 hours, but he won't talk to us. Soon as one of us steps in the room he stops all motion, like he went catatonic. One of the officers said with a sigh as he fished out a pack of smokes. Okay, so why do? I began before taking a closer look and I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Now, you don't often see the back of your own head, but it's still noticeable. Even more so when you have a very specifically X-shaped birthmark on your neck. Looks like you caught on, huh? Dr. Swan said as he handed me 2 sheets of paper, one labeled Steve Keegan, the other, John Doe. On these sheets were a set of fingerprints, a set of identical fingerprints. We've gone through your medical files to compare DNA tests, X-rays, CAT scans, whatever we had available. We've checked height, weight, we ran a full facial scan, damn near everything. All of them weren't identical, he continued with a deep sigh. And what is he here for? I asked in cautious fear. The 2 officers looked at one another for a while, before the older one spoke. Came into the station covered in blood and holding a butcher knife, babbling about how he did the job, the snakes have lost their heads or some nonsense like that. After some tests we figured out most of the blood was from a pig, some his own, and some from a young couple who went missing a few years back. After that he refused to speak to anyone, only demanding to see the mirror while my mind was trying to process everything I had just been told. The other officer asked something that took all my attention. Can you try talking to him? He asked somewhat nervously. I looked at the 2 as if they were the crazy ones, expecting me to go in there with a killer who looked just like me. As dangerous as he might have been, I needed to know more about this evil clone. So with a deep breath in, and one more glare towards the officers, I entered the room and made my way over to the table. Just as they said, he was frozen in place when I entered the room, but once he saw who it was he'd be speaking to, his blank face turned into a wide sinister smile. I on the other hand could only choke on confused fear and worry as I looked at my twisted reflection. It was like standing in a mirror that projects a reflection of yourself. One that has gone completely mad. His hair was disheveled and unkempt. Cuts and bruises covered his arms and face. His hands, still caked with dry blood, looked to have been burnt from the wrist down, crosses sloppily carved into the backs of his hands. What was most disturbing above all that, however, were his eyes. They were what can only be described as completely deranged. They were far too wide open, rarely ever blinking, and bloodshot to the point it looked to have red spider webs forming out from his irises. He quickly began rocking again as he looked at me, then the table, then me again, seemingly signaling me to sit down, and after a few minutes of weighing my options I did just that. I cleared my throat as I looked at him before starting my line of questions, trying to sound as calm and collected as possible when doing so. Well, this is certainly interesting, so do you have a name you'd like me to call you by? I tried to be as polite as possible. He tapped the counter softly as he looked at me. They've all been calling me John, so you can call me John, good old Johnny boy. He began. Much like his appearance, his voice was no different than mine, save for the twisted excitement in it. Think Mark Hamill's Joker, as if he had been holding in laughter with every word. Okay John, do you mind telling me where you are? I asked. He looked at me for a while, his neck occasionally cracking before answering. Side Hill, yep that's it, Side Hill Hospital. Hey, that was alliteration, or was it a simile? Whatever, it sounds funny, he said with a soft giggle, silently clapping to himself. Finally I asked the question that turned our conversation from unsettling to disturbing. And would you mind telling me why you're here, John? I asked, a hint of caution in my voice, and when he answered, it felt for a moment even the darkest pits of hell had more light in it than the man sitting before me. Oh, because I killed them. Oh yeah, I killed Ray Al Good. Slowly too, opened them both from gut to chin, he said with great pride, no longer able to hold in his chuckles any longer as he told me of his actions, causing him to burst out in the most twisted and sinister laughter I've ever heard, as he began clapping slightly louder. Now I've dealt with the more violent patients on multiple occasions, even some of the killers, but none of them were this happy and forward about the terrible things they've done. It didn't help that the overjoyed psychopath shared the same face as my own. I felt a chill run down my spine so bad it should have given me frostbite, as I tried to swallow my fear as I pushed forward. And who are they? I asked through shaking breaths. As soon as those words hit his ears, that sinister grin painted across his face somehow grew even wider. The ones who stabbed us in the back, Steve, he said, cackling as he did so. I could feel myself freeze up in fear, as if I had been caught in Medusa's stone gaze, forced to stay planted as I watched my doppelganger howl like a laughing hyena as he violently began nodding his head as well as pointing back and forth between the two of us. As he did so I noticed something extremely alarming. He had somehow slipped off his handcuffs. I looked towards the two-way mirror in an attempt to signal somebody that I may be in danger, only to be met with more laughter. Oh yeah, don't worry about them, they're not there anymore, or I guess it would be more accurate to say we aren't there anymore, he said with a confident smirk. I felt a cold sweat spread through my body as everything he began to tell me battled in my head to decide what would be questioned first until I finally landed on one. John, who did you kill? I asked slowly, trying to prepare for his answer. That answer horrified me deeply. Oh, nobody special. Just that sweet little flower of ours, and of course that slimy, two-faced snake in the garden, he said, his normally dementedly joyful tone turning to one of bitter malice on those last words, before quickly breaking out into another wave of cackles. Suddenly it all made sense. He was talking about my ex Daisy who left me for my best friend before running off together. I could feel my body begin to shake as the dark images flashed through my head. And the pig's blood? I asked weakly as the passing thought of the officer's words came by. Well, I needed to give them a demonstration, didn't I? He almost sarcastically asked. I could feel a wave of vomit slowly crawl its way out of my stomach at his words. Sure, I despised both of them with a fair amount of passion. A murder fantasy was never something I actually thought about, especially not one in the manner he described. After a few minutes of mentally breaking down and hyperventilating, I asked the question I should have asked at the very start. Who are you? What are you? It seemed that was also the question he'd been waiting to answer. As the moment he heard it, his grin stretched wider than ever before, then with the literal blink of an eye, he was standing on the table in a crouched position to meet me face to face. I nearly fell back in my seat the moment he moved, teleported more like, as he slowly raised his arm up, before softly tapping my temple with his index finger, then bringing it to his own head to do the same to himself, before quickly sending his hand towards my face and shoving me to the ground, his twisted laughter quickly following. The back of my head collided with the tile flooring, putting me in a heavy daze. By the time I regathered my bearings, I had felt someone rapidly shaking my shoulders. I shot up and began sliding away from whoever had been standing over me, only to look up and see Dr. Swan and the two officers, all having faces of great worry and confusion. They quickly began explaining that not long after I had entered the room, there was a power outage within it. They tried to get in but the door wouldn't budge, and by the time the lights came back and they were able to get in, all they saw was me flat on my back screaming bloody murder. All files of John Doe had been completely wiped, much like him they just vanished into thin air. I resigned soon after that. Eventually the FBI found their way to our hospital, leaving me to be the one being questioned. Their responses were unnerving to say the least, not to mention highly confidential. Most of it has been kept under wraps and away from the public due to the strange and unexplainable nature of the situation. Hell Daisy's death was only a passing mention in our local news, both identities of the victims remaining anonymous. After all, they went off the grid years ago, no more than a shadow to the people in town. I've moved far away, states away, out of sheer paranoia. I'm absolutely terrified of myself, what I can become, or maybe what I already am. I've tried to forget the horrible experience, but it always creeps back into my mind, fueling me with fear at the thought of what I'm possibly capable of, especially when I hear the sound of deranged cackles coming from outside my bedroom window.